So, hello everyone, Transmission64, and we have an interviewee for today for you, who is called Danko.
Danko.
Hallo, wie geht's? Ich bin der Danko, ja.
Oh, are we doing this in German? German.
We didn't know that.
Oh shit! I should have practiced a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Now rewind. So you are already Germanized around there, pretty much, right? Since you moved.
Yeah. I mean, when in Rome, although it's in Düsseldorf, so better to be assimilated. It helps.
It's been how many years now?
3.5 years for me actually since I moved to Düsseldorf from Stockholm, and it sure helps to actually speak the language and eat the sausages and the stuff and drink the
Eat the
beer.
sausages. So you went to Germany to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah, it's actually very hard to find bad sausages here. Not like Sweden with the Dennis Korv. Not even this, like the kids' sausage here is like 98% meat, and it's been slow smoked, and that's the Dennis Korv.
Nice.
It started early age here with proper quality sausage.
Okay.
Proper corvity.
And currywurst, my favorite.
Right, so we have a bunch of questions that we would like to ask you. We have some questions that come from listeners of the Slay Radio shows that we do. We did an interview with you, 3 years ago?
That's been a while.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, we have some questions from ourselves and some from listeners, and we thought we would try to kind of start with focusing on the SID and whatnot, seeing as it's Transmission64. I don't know, maybe kick off and ask what was your first computer, and was it a 64, and if not?
Why not?
Yeah.
I could not afford one at first. So my first computer was the Casio PB100F or whatever it's called, a rectangular thing with the BASIC, and I was actually making scroll text demos and effects already back then. And then I got a VIC-20, and that's where I started making music in BASIC. And eventually I managed to get a Commodore 64. So that was my third computer, actually, the 64.
Wow, impressive. And how old were you when you started to make music?
Well, I mean, I think music-wise, computers aside, I think I was 8 years old when I wrote my first composition, and I played it live on piano for the entire school. And then I guess 10 years and onwards doing music on computers.
Wow.
I think the Commodore 64, I found songs I made when I was 11. And then I guess I did VIC-20 like a year or two before that. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. We can say that music is in your genes, right? Because your grandfather was a big Hungarian composer, right?
Well, there's a lot of grandfathers everywhere, both in Hungary and Slovakia. My father used to be a professional musician. He actually still is, even though he's retired. And we got some cousins and distant relatives in America that were pretty big musicians, professional studio musicians and artists as well. So I guess, although I do feel that most of my talent, if you could call it that, actually came from my mother. And she never played an instrument in her life, but she could sing a song and went up to the piano, and then she looked at the keys, and then she just played the melody she just sang. I'm like, how did you do that? And she's like, I don't know. It just kind of made sense. Like, okay.
Natural.
So, yeah, really. So I guess it's from both sides. Lucky me. Yay.
And then, that brings us to your contact with the scene as well, right? Because that sort of came with the music. Your first contact with the scene and the copy parties and things you attended very early on.
Yeah, you were just a youngster, if I remember correctly, when I first saw you.
Yeah, I guess. The thing is that, of course, obviously you end up meeting other people in school that are also having fun with Commodore 64 or some other computer, and then you start hanging out, and then next thing you know it, you're making demos. You just don't know that that's what they're called. And then somebody knows someone, and they start sending floppy disks around, and that's swapping, but you don't know, you have no idea. And eventually somebody says, yeah, we have got this thing at a school, let's check it out. And then we go there, and suddenly we're a group in a demo party, and that's kind of organically how it goes, right?
Yeah.
So it was also kind of some of the first in Sweden. When I look at it, there was some stuff in Gothenburg like 2 years earlier, like small events and so on. So people probably didn't even really figure out what this was, at least not in Stockholm by the time.
Yeah.
Neither did I.
So that was one of the first groups then that you joined, or did you kind of co-found the group in a sense, or did you just join an existing group? Which one was it?
So
either way.
I moved school from Fordala, which is actually where the first demo party was, later to Stimmet. And in Stimmet, in my class, there was a boy called Johan Sjöström. And he was doing Commodore 64 stuff, and we started hanging out, and we started a group together called Shoddy Software. And then eventually we did some pretty bad demos. We met another guy who did some koala paint pictures, and then those were the demos. And then somebody asked us to join, and then I think we joined Science 451. So we actually founded Shoddy Software, and then afterwards we joined Science 451 together, and his handle was Professor J. But the condition for us to join Science 451 was that he had to change it to a handle that didn't have more than 8 characters, because could only have 8 sprites at the time. And then he chose Synchro. So yeah, that's the guy.
Speaking of which, probably worth to mention then your group history as well. How did you get to FairLight? And what was the way?
I joined FairLight in 1989. So not the earliest, but pretty early member. I guess the reason, because as always, there's somebody running the group that is hunting for people and talent, and that was Viper. So I joined FairLight because of that. Later, I joined Sensor Design. I was kind of still doing stuff on Amiga for FairLight, and actually in Phenomena as well. So I was in Phenomena and Sensor Design, and still a little FairLight. But then, it was FairLight just until then. Then focused, on like 95% on Sensor Design. And many years later, I rejoined FairLight. I don't know if I've been in FairLight longer than Sensor by now. Maybe not. But yeah, and now it's all FairLight.
Yeah, and you were always the kind of musician mainly in all of these groups, I presume.
Well, everybody did this and that, right? So I mean, I've also been doing sprites and even sprite animations and some coding, assembler coding, and fonts, char sets, stuff like that. But you kind of the cool thing is that you find somebody who is way better than you at programming, and then somebody who's way better than you making graphics, and then you just do whatever you can bring to the table, and that's when you make great demos. So I kind of I did some non-music stuff on and off, but for the big productions, it was always only audio.
Mm-hmm. And as for Sid, which way you lean on the chip? Is it 6581 or 8580?
It used to always be 6581 revision 3. It's the best one, if you have a good one, that is, because there's going to be a lot of revision 3s that don't sound as good, or they're going to sound good with certain musicians' material and not others. I would guess that for the 6581 eventually, it's the AR5, is that what it's called? and that's the most stable one. However, later on, when you start using the 8580, you see that it's way more stable, and it's kind of a reference. So even though some of the songs will sound better on the 6581, the 8580 is more robust. So nowadays, I think I've been making music on the 8580 for about as long as I've done 6581 stuff. So it's kind of a tie. But most of the songs back then and into the 90s I did on the 6581. So I guess I would have to say 6581. Yeah.
Especially the R3. I actually checked. I only have the R4s around here. So
I actually have a bunch of them, and I used to, because I did like 100 songs or more on that one particular chip, and then I could always pick it up in a blind listening. I was like randomly putting in the SID chips in the same computer and listening, and when that one came in into play, something just snapped into focus. Like, oh yeah, this is my childhood. This is what everything sounded like. And then I looked, yeah, that's the one. And I actually keep that one on my office desk at work at Ubisoft, so I can look at it every day. It's kind of
is that
my heirloom.
Is that the original SID that you had in your first C64 that you still have?
Yes.
It's totally functional.
Yeah, actually, I think one pin broke, but I don't think it would be impossible to fix that. But other than that, yes, it's fully functional.
Having done so many SIDs, I counted 276 in HVSC. You must have tried many editors, like from everyone, including mine that I sent you, that you never used, by the way. But do you have any preference on the editor and like a favorite, if you will, from I don't know, work flow wise or audio wise, and how do you pick them for usage? Essentially, when you find an editor, is it mostly the sound that you focus on, or is it the workflow that is more important?
So yeah, actually, I've done over 300 SIDs. It's just that they're not all in high voltage SID collection. I found a bunch of discs that I should send to somebody for curating them, and there's like at least 30 more. So the thing is that initially you didn't have much. You had Sound Monitor, and that was the big one for like everybody at the time, and it wasn't very good in any way, shape or form. Other than that, it was the only one that you could actually make SIDs, kind of like Chris Hulsbeck and others. It was very limited though, and not very optimized. And then I haven't used every editor on the planet. I think that up to mid-90s, I did try everything. And then after that, there's been a lot of branching editors in different areas. But what happened was that I got so lucky that I got to be one of the users for Jens Christian Hus, JCH in Vibrance editor. And I was one of the first persons to get that stuff from him, because, I mean, it wasn't public domain or anything. And it's a modular thing. Once you get into it, it was just better than anything else. And I had been involved in developing a couple of editors. I mean, your editor, I was kind of feedbacking and giving you some intel. And I released it. I don't know if there is something that I just dabble around with that's still on one of the discs. And then SodaSoft, with Jeroen Soda, I used his first, what was the Soda monitor? It was called something else officially. But then he contacted me, and then I helped him iterate on the 3.2 version and 4.0 with sampling. So I actually sent my songs to him, and he could pack them for me, because nobody had a packer until Pernod actually made me one, so I could pack them as well. Also Groovy Beat from Groovy Bits, and the what was the Rock Monitor clone with an MI interrupt that Call the 12th also did. Beatbox.
I remember. I actually spoke to Call the 12th, and you had complained to him that you can't do bigger vibratos, and he said, "Yeah, that's on purpose because Danko's vibratos are fucking crazy."
I think he was right. That's, I mean, the epitome of that was a SID called Busstrafik I did, and after that, like, no, I have to keep it flatter. And ever since I think the problem was that I never had like a delay in the vibrato back then, so it came strong from the beginning. It sounds like rubbish, and then when I started having it flow and bloom, then it sounded better.
Yeah.
But yeah, and actually I don't do a lot of vibratos ever since. So he's right. He was right all along. So I've been instrumental in developing a bunch of editors. And then with JCH also, he was so proactive. You just kind of got all of the things, and then you debugged it with him, and helped out with stuff. And it was just better than anything else that I've been using. And then once you got involved in that kind of infrastructure, there's no need to kind of opt out of it. So that was the one that I used a lot for a lot of years, and it was the best. Nowadays with Go Tracker and also the SID Factory, which kind of is descending from JCH original stuff, those are way better when it comes to workflow. I think that you could still do some stuff with the JCH editor back then that you cannot do in Go Tracker, for instance, but you can do most of it in the SID Factory. So then I would say that the workflow is maybe easier to get into on Go Tracker today, and having an editor on a PC or Mac with that kind of environment instead of running things in Vice even or on a Commodore 64, it's so much better for workflow, saving files and loading them and so on, and not having to deal with floppies and whatnot.
Have you been involved? Have you been involved anything in the development of SID Factory 2? Seeing as you were so involved in, or maybe not involved, but were on board with the JCH's editor back then.
Yeah, I was kind of about to jump onto that thing because Laxity has kind of also been very instrumental in developing that, and we used to work together at Funcom in the mid-90s in Oslo, making audio for video games. And but then what happened was that FairLight had a bunch of musicians, and Pantaloon said, "I'm going to do the coolest music player on the planet, and we have to standardize." So everybody voted, and then we decided on Go Tracker 2. And then he never made that player ever. So that was fun. But then by the time I was kind of invested in that one and never went to SID Factory 2, I was kind of looking into it earlier this year, and I had some connection with both JCH and Laxity about stuff. But no, so far I haven't done anything actually, because I'm working on other things, shall we say. So the latest ones today, Go Tracker 2 or SID Factory 2, they're the best, I would argue, when it comes to workflow. And you can do almost everything sound-wise in anything today. You're not limited by that. But like, to answer your question, like back then, if it was about workflow or sound, it was always the same sound, wasn't it? Because it's the SID. However, it's the functionality of how you set up all the parameters and how you can set values changing and so on, and wavetables and whatnot. A lot of them were very hard-coded, and you couldn't do a lot. But then when you had this data-driven thing like you had in JCH and nowadays, then you could do so many more things that you could not do in the old ones. But you could kind of do that already in a more clunky way, like in the mid-90s already. So by that time, to me, first you were looking into functionality of the sounds you could do. And then eventually everything became like similar, like JCH and onwards. Then it was more about the editor itself after.
Because in the early days, you could actually hear a SID and you knew exactly which player it was made in. So it's like, yeah, this is the sound of this player. So it's both technical aspects of it and I guess the implementation side of things that changes. It's not like, just pushing parameters to the SID, I mean.
Yeah, like Future Composer and similar, based on Rob Hubbard stuff. Rob Hubbard coded every sound for every song he ever made. So, and you didn't do that in those editors. So they had hard coded, like built in hi-hat on the bass sound or whatever. And same with the Matt Gray routine. There was a lot that was hard coded that you could use or not use. So it sounded very bespoke, as you say, like. And I think also like with Sound Monitor, you couldn't set a max and minimum range for anything value and go up and down. It always branched. It sounded like crap when you try to do like pulse rate modulation or things, it always branched, which is something that I really dislike from SIDs. So you can hear exactly like, okay, yeah, that's the one. And also the vibratos. If you look into Martin Galway's driver and player, there is no other driver on the planet that can sound like that one actually. Not even GT2 or SID Factor 2. I can promise you that. So that is like the holy grail. However, there's no editor for it, is it? So, and also it takes like an entire screen of raster time. Sometimes it even wraps. So you can't really use it for demos. But other than that, I think everything else you can do in any modern driver today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When you think of a good composition, then what matters to you the most? A well-composed song.
So I always kind of favored harmonies and melody. I mean, it's cool if there's a groove. I like if it's funky and groovy, and I'm a sucker for electronic sounds in general. However, I'm more impressed with something that even if it's using like traditional SID sounds, if the harmonies and melodies and the arrangement is really great. There's been this stuff lately where people are, doing these amazing like 20, 30 time speed players and doing almost digital sampling with the synthesis and making incredible sounds that doesn't really sound like a 64, and then they forget to maybe use it to make a really cool song. So that's kind of where I stand. I would love it if somebody used those sounds but actually made a really good song, and if they don't, then I would rather just hear a traditional SID with really nice chords and melody, something that moves me. So it's harmonies and melodies is most important to me.
So in that vein, also, do you find it worthwhile to try to actually do music on the 64, cramming into those 3 voices or maybe 4 with samples? Or do you find it more free to do like original compositions on, I don't know, real instruments and whatnot? Is there some sort of a balance between those, or which would you prefer? Let's put it that way.
I think they're not mutually exclusive. I can do both. That's the cool thing. And, I'm still doing Commodore 64 music and I'm doing a lot of other music. So I get best of both worlds. To me, I would say necessarily the 3 voices is not limiting. It could be more limiting to have unlimited resources because it limits you in your like creativity, because you could just throw more stuff onto the thing in your sequence DAW. And load down more sounds and more. And the limits of 3 oscillators is actually forcing you to focus on other things. And I've been talking to many other 64 musicians, and they all agree, like people who made music on the Commodore 64 and Amiga with limited channels, we really did the hard core school of arranging and polyrhythmical arrangements and so on. And people who didn't have that, and they had 32 voices, whatever, they just everything plays at once, and there's no separation. And if you listen to like the best production in the world, like some old Michael Jackson album, whatever, and you start to count polyphony, it's very few. It's less than 10, because things are not playing at the same time, and that's why they are so clean and they can make it so loud and crisp sounding in the mix. And when you are forced to do a SID with 3 voices, then you have to figure out, okay, so where do I put the 4th sound in there polyrhythmically between in the gaps, and
every little detail matters.
Yeah, so the thing is that you become really good at arranging and polyrhythmical stuff and making much better arrangements even on other platforms because of the work you did on the SID. So to me, it's not limiting. I actually like limits. I think it makes for a challenge and makes it more fun.
Okay, yeah, but at the same time, of course, you do commercial tracks as well. So it's a half-half, I guess. But to those, to those that just start, even if they never had a 64, you would definitely recommend to do 64 and Amiga mods first, right? so they can start with the basics, and then
or limit. You could emulate the limits, and I've been suggesting that to people. Like if you limit yourself with a few pieces of gear or plugins and set up some rules. And work within that, you will probably focus on the more important things, and you will grow faster and better, with your skills. So it doesn't have to be the 64, but I think anybody who didn't start with limits, also in code, right, and programming and graphics, can start with anything like on a modern PC. There's a lot lost there of opportunities to learn fundamental things.
I see.
So yeah, I've heard about this thing called the Sidulator. It's apparently the most accurate SID emulation on the planet. So could you tell us more about how that came to be, and what is it, and why don't I have it?
Yeah. So long story short, it's kind of secret.
It's fine. We won't tell anyone.
Yeah. So and it's actually not just an emulator; it's also a simulator. There is a distinct difference. So basically, the reason that people started hearing about Sidulator is because we started calling a project Sidulator 2 years ago. Before then, it didn't even have a name. And the reason people started hearing about it is because I started using it on the Encore 64 remix album that I worked on with a bunch of really talented and legendary people. So basically, it is kind of like SID Play. It's just that it doesn't try to emulate things like SID Play does, or the other, emulators that you have in Vice that you can select. And the best ones are said to be like cycle accurate. This one actually, Sidulator actually can simulate everything on the silicon. Every gate, every voltage, everything on the actual chip. So
it's
like
it's not real time then.
Well, so the simulator is not real time. It takes about 1 hour to render 1 minute of audio.
Wow.
But it can run on FPGA. So it could be. It was coded initially for FPGA, so it could kind of be used in the Ultimate 64 and so on. The emulator part, though, can run on a PC or a Mac. It's going to take quite a lot of CPU, but it runs in real time like SID Play. And it's already so much better than anything else. You're even hearing all the noise that's, on the circuit board, and the leaking of the gates from data that goes into the ground and then back into the audio path, because it's actually emulating, and the simulator is simulating everything down to the silicon. So yeah, in order to do that, you kind of need to have the actual drawings, I would say, of the 6581 and the 8580, and then maybe you need equipment and knowledge to be able to read them and use them. And I've said too much.
It's fine. It's fine. We'll keep it a secret. It's good. All good.
Basically, I mean, it's a sensitive topic, and it's kind of, the plan was to kind of release the emulator first, and then maybe an FPGA license thing later. Right now, it's not really happening, but it's been kind of 4 or 5 years of work. I've been involved about 3 years on this, and it's actually being used in on the Encore 64 and some other things. So rendering out stuff like that. The cool thing is, like, if I want to have a different BPM, the tempo for a track for remix, instead of doing time stretch of the audio, I'm actually just with changing the clock frequency of the 64 in the simulator. And then it's gonna have, like, the SID will still have the same envelope speeds. Everything's the same. It's just that the player playing the notes in the 6502 is going to have exactly the cycle count for the CPU clock synced to the music that I'm going to use. And I think the best example is I made a remix called Eskimonica on the Encore 64 album. And Eskimonica is a cover that I made on Dane and his song. It's an amazing original track. He still uses the JCH editors, by the way. And then I used Sidulator to render out all the tracks and change the speed, but not change the actual SID behavior. And then that's partially in the remix. So if you want to check it out. And then you will listen to the original SID and hear that the speed is completely different. It's way, way faster. And still, if I would stretch it out with the recorded audio, like time stretch, it would be like very, very sloppy and dull envelopes of the sounds, and the vibratos would go slow and so on. But none of that happens when you do this, like using Sidulator and just changing the frequency for the CPU.
Wow. Impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't talk about you playing instruments, I believe, but you must have started with those early on as well.
Yes, I mean, I was sitting in my dad's lap playing like electric organ. It wasn't a Hammond, it was a Finnish company, 3-letter acronym, kind of. But we had pianos. We had a grand piano as well. So I was 3 years old, started playing it. I think I was 5 or 6 when I started taking piano lessons with this hardcore, Hungarian lady with this very famous Hungarian book about learning how to play the piano, which is like, it starts with like, it starts at 200 miles per hour and then it speeds up.
Just throw people in the deep end.
Bä vita lam, and then it's like, no, but I want to play with both hands. No, that's next year. No, this was like super.
No, you need
intense
feet as well in the first lesson. You need your toes for this one.
Yeah, so I actually started playing like that, and then playing the piano daily. And then when I went into 7th grade, I went into music school. So there were additional music class almost every day. And I still went to my piano teacher. And then she couldn't teach me more because she kind of specialized in the first years of getting proper piano education the classic way. But then eventually, it's like, no, you need to find somebody else. And then I got a fantastic teacher who is with a very famous music family within jazz and funk and other things. And she could kind of not just give me homework to play, but also introduce me to new music and thinking in harmonies and so on. It was really, really nice. So yeah, ever since I was just a couple of years old, I've actually always been studying music, playing music and so on, And when I was like 12, 13 years old, when I had the Commodore 64, I was playing piano 2-3 hours every day. 1 hour just doing, these finger trainings, just scales up and down, stuff like that. 1 hour, and then the homework, and then just playing and improvising and so on, like 2-3 hours every day for all of my childhood.
Yeah, definitely not only runs in your blood, but you were always surrounded with music. And I actually wonder, like, in your work nowadays, you work as a sound designer for games, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So.
So they tell me.
So, how much of your music skills are you using for that, or are there other skills that you need to use for that position? Because it's mostly about sound effects, right?
It's not even sound effects because I specialize in dialogue and narrative. So it's anything that comes out of a human being's mouth is kind of what I do. With all these video games, there is a lot of sound design, of course, because it ends up with this. You have to record it, you have to post-produce it, you have to mix it, just like any other sound, of course, when you're doing sound design and mixing and whatnot. So when you're doing these gigantic projects with hundreds and hundreds of people in the core team and thousands of people external, and you work 3-4 years on a project, it's not going to be one person doing everything like back in the days. So you even don't have a musician usually internal, because you're gonna outsource for whoever is the best person to make that music for that particular thing, right? So and then the music is maybe just a few percent of all the assets for the audio in a big game. So that person doesn't also have to work 3-4 years. It's going to be somebody who does maybe a half year of work on and off. And the rest of us are actually doing full-time 3, 4, 5 years on a game. To answer your question, I find it very interesting that every audio designer in the video game industry that I met that are really good, they're musicians as well. It's just something that puts it together. Like there's something how your brain is wired, and maybe you started making music, and then you were interested in the gear and in the mixer and in the echo machine and the drum machine, and the next thing you know it, you're an engineer.
Yeah, you kind of learn how to pick out the differences in sound, and kind of learn how to balance them in the mix and all of that, kind of naturally in a way.
Exactly. I mean, you want to represent your ideas better, so you need a better guitar, a better amplifier, and then you need to record it better, and then you want to balance it and so on. So there are some people who are totally not interested in that. They just want to express themselves on an instrument. And then there are people who just love to. I don't know how to play guitar, but I know where to point a microphone, and I love this. So there's all sorts of people for that. What I've found is that the really talented audio engineers and sound designers in game, they're always musicians to some extent. And the other thing is that even though I don't actually do music or work with it, everything that you learn in making music production, but also composing and playing music, everything can be applied because you have the cadence. It's like if you're really good at making, a song where you have the intro and then there's something coming like before the chorus, and then there's a bridge and whatnot. You need to have this nice flow so it's not boring and so on. And the dynamics, you can apply that in narrative and in game design. Like if you're just killing zombies full tilt, it's fatiguing. You need to have a break. If everything's full maxed, then nothing is full maxed, because it's all relative, right? So and music is a really great school to learn dynamics and cadence. So a lot of like directing of music and audio, you can see that also in the gameplay and so on. Then when it comes to the cognitive function of listening to music, that I've done a lot of research over the years that based on music, you can actually apply that also to how you mix audio and so on. We used to do that at DICE all the time, and I still use it all the time in the productions I do. So the knowledge of that I accumulated because of music, I can actually apply them on other things, and I find that very interesting. It kind of ties together.
Yeah, like cooking and mixing, EQing your food, I guess. Could you kind of bring us through your history of employment in the gaming industry, from like Funcom all the way up to Ubisoft? Briefly, was Funcom the first gaming place you worked at, or where did you start, and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, just like it started with a demo scene.
But that wasn't paid work.
So I had sound monitor, and I was doing songs on it, and my friend, somebody I knew, got a copy of my songs, and then somebody he knew on the other side of the city got to hear it, and he was making a game, and he said, "Yeah, I want to buy your song because I'm going to use it in my game." All right. And then he wanted to buy it for like, I don't know, like 20 euros, I don't know, 30 euros, like, oh, that's amazing. But then I'm like, but this song is actually crap and it's not fit for your game. What game is it? It's a shoot 'em up. Yeah, and you wanted to, I made a song called PV Bota. It's actually on HVSC, and it's pretty hilarious. But I didn't give a rat's ass at the time. I just had fun because kids are supposed to have fun. There were no aesthetic stress there. Just expressing yourself with crayons and and you don't follow the lines and tracing them. So basically I said like, but this is not a good song for that. Let me make music. So then I made music for it, and the game is called Squad 1. And then we did get paid by Firebird, I think. And then we started on another game called Vietnam Gunboat. That was never finished. So I was already doing stuff there. And then there were some other people who asked me to send them songs for the games. I worked on a game called Xiphoid, and I was going to work on, but that guy died, unfortunately. And then I was working on some other games, but there were always some other person who actually got the gig at the end because of contractual obligations. Menace of Noise were really good at that. Like, yeah, I want Danko's track for this. And it's awesome. Like, actually, our contract says you have to buy one of ours, and then Zero and Tel's going to make it for you. So Charles Diener was really good at that stuff. Still is, though. And so I actually did stuff like that. And then there was a guy in Gothenburg making an Amiga game, and he wanted some music. So I did that, both an intro song and 9 in-game songs for a game called Deep Core. And also because of distribution rights, there are like 3 versions of it, and some of them don't have my music. Some of them have some of it, and one have all of it. So that's a bit weird. So then, yeah, I was kind of contracting externally like that. And then Funcom happened, and I moved in 95 to Oslo and worked on, Pocahontas on Sega Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, and a bunch of other games.
With Carl-Henrik and Köhler, I guess, was there, and Juger, and who else? Of people that people might know.
Laxity, Juger Liljedahl, Gay Shelta, and Laxity, me. We're a bunch. I mean, the whole Funcom was founded by demosceners. Omega Supreme, Olav Mörkeryd was one of the co-founders. So yeah, that was fun. And then later on, I started doing other things. But then I really missed making video game audio, because it was like going to a workshop with talented people and looking at they're doing some animations and some code, and you get inspired and you want to do some stuff. And I just loved it. So I contacted EA Sports in Burnaby, and then I started working externally on the NHL hockey games, and I did like 7 years of it. And then, I actually meanwhile also did some music for a sensor game, Neurostone, the PlayStation game, Autodestruct. I did the end theme there. Then many other careers later, I kind of felt that, I sold the music store that I've had for 11 years. I didn't have to work for a bunch of years if I didn't want to. I started thinking, what do I actually want to do? And one of the things was to make audio for video games. Eventually, I ended up at DICE and doing Mirror's Edge, a bunch of Battlefield games, some other games. 5 years later, I moved to Amsterdam to Guerrilla Games, Sony. I worked on Killzone Shadowfall. That was the release title for PlayStation 4. Started working on another game, the Horizon Zero Dawn. But then I had been crunching too much, like 60, 70-hour weeks, and it was as bad at Sony as it was at EA. So I actually just went to Belgium to become a brewer and started brewing beer for a living. and then came back to Sweden and been brewing beer for a few years, building a few breweries. But then I went back into like indie development because a lot of colleagues from DICE and other places, they grew up and had families, and they like, I can't do this crunch stuff, and I want to have a life balance. But I also want to work with smaller teams where it's not like 400 people and this big project and stock market reasons why you should do this and that, you know. So there's been like 12 or 13 at least companies starting up in Stockholm from these colleagues. And I started with the VR indie developer together with some old colleagues and new colleagues. And then after a few years, money ran out, of course. And then there was a new indie startup, and then I was co-founding that. And then I worked on that. Meanwhile, I was also brewing beer. But then, I ended up moving to Düsseldorf to work at Ubisoft. And then, it's been 3.5 years now. So I think it's like 7 companies that I've been working at making a video game audio for a living, but it's also been external stuff and contractual stuff over the years. And started actually with the Commodore 64,
Yeah. And
that's everything.
Yeah, and your current position in Ubisoft is head of audio or voiceovers, or what was it?
It's lead voice designer. So it means that I am kind of the product owner and point of contact for everything that is dialogue narrative with audible, with voice. VO producer is kind of some other companies call it. I'm also part of the leadership and management. We're about 30 people doing audio in Düsseldorf for a bunch of games worldwide. We have people working on Avatar. We have people working on the X Defiant that's coming out now. And Avatar is coming out now. Next week, there's a VR game coming out, Assassin's Creed Nexus VR. I worked on that for 3.5 years. I did all the dialogue on that one and systems and whatnot. And we have people working on Settlers, on Anno, a bunch of other games, So I'm involved also in the management and leadership part and being direct manager to people and so on, in addition to what I do for video games. But lead voice designer and direct manager, I guess, are my official titles.
Wow. And then I guess you stick with this in your work. So do you have any ambition for the future to make music for games?
No.
No, not at all. Okay, that was
short and concise.
Definitely a straight answer.
The thing is like, I love my job and there's so much fun in what I do, and I get to do so many different things and disciplines within my discipline. And making music would be very limiting in comparison. I'm building pipelines, automated server systems. I'm doing like condition-based, data-driven, real-time triggering systems. I'm actually architect and designing, and then the programmer implements it. I implement audio in the game engine and in the audio engine. And I am part of casting the actors. I direct them, I record them, I'm at the recording sessions. I do post-editing, post-processing, and I'm doing, like design also for scripts and whatnot. There's so many different things I get to do. And if you're doing music, that's all you do. And then somebody else is going to tell you, what you're supposed to do. And then you have to work within that. And you have these deadlines and so on. And iterations. It's pretty rough from what I can tell when I talk to colleagues who do that for a living. And also the thing is like, I could emulate a lot of styles because I can actually do that. It's just that there's always going to be somebody making better jazz than I can, better techno than I can, and that's the person you should actually hire. So unless you're like Hans Zimmer and then you want it to sound like Hans Zimmer, so you're going to hire Hans Zimmer. My ambition would be to get Glenn Brown to make music for any game I work on. I'm actually trying.
Love that idea.
Because that cinematic stuff is just mind-blowingly good, and I don't understand why he is not in Hollywood making music for games full time, because it's that great, Yep. That would be a better fit than me.
Well, that kind of leads to another question that we had on the docs is, do you have a favorite style of music that you, I don't know, prefer to do? Or there's two things. One, that favorite that you like to listen to, and favorite that you would like to make.
So I listen to a lot of music because, like, if I'm gonna do happy hardcore rave, I can get much more inspiration in country music, and vice versa. And you can pick up things there, and so on. And if I'm gonna do country music, I'm gonna listen to Gabber. Maybe not. So I do listen to a lot, but at the end of the day, I love electronic sounds. I really like it, like synthetic sounds. So synth music, industrial music, synth music. So VMV Nation and that kind of music is kind of what I really dig listening to. Laibach is like also a huge favorite of mine. But then nowadays, a lot of synthwave and retrowave, because it kind of has the aesthetics that I always liked, and they're using those machines and synthesizers, but in a more modern way. And there's so much of it to listen to. I also actually produce a bunch of it lately with some new projects. So I really like that. And then in contrast, I listen to a lot of singer-songwriter music, just somebody with an acoustic guitar and singing. And I listen to a lot of with the family for dinners and so on. Listen to a lot of cool jazz and stuff like that, like Duke Ellington, anything like that, to get a nice mood. In the mornings, I turn on at the office. I turn on like
Slay
lounge
radio.
piano, jazz music. Yeah, of course, I always only listen to Slay radio. Every week moment. So like these like bossa nova, jazz, lounge piano stuff, just to have a nice background. So that's kind of, but yeah, mainly synthwave and singer-songwriter, like a lot of indie folk music, and then synth. That is kind of what I listen to, mainly. Even and this year, like Ren, all the things he does. So much. And then music I like to do, anything that's electronic. Again, I really enjoy using plugins and synthesizers and drum machines to do textures and sounds that are synthetic. That is, I love working with that. And so that those aesthetics then become kind of paramount. So I'm not going to do jazz or blues or punk music really. And then so anything like synth or techno or synthwave, retrowave. Right now I'm doing like romantic retrowave.
Retromantics, was it called?
Yeah, Retromantics is the latest project and the single I released with Indigo, called Black and Gold, out now on Spotify. But I'm also working on the next single, collaboration with Turbonite.
Nice.
And some other things in the pipeline. So yeah, kind of, I like to do electronic stuff, and I always like to have some kind of concept, so like an aesthetic choice, and then I dig into that. What sounds are good here? 80s is very simple. It's going to be these drum machines. It's going to be these reverbs, and then you work with them, and but you try to make it a bit more crisp and fresh and modern, and that I have a lot of fun doing. So yeah, electronic music like that, I guess, is what I do the most. And piano music. Like last year, I released 2 albums with just piano music, and the end game would be having a grand piano in a room in a house where I live, and I would just go in there and play and record piano music and release lots of instrumental, soft ballad songs. But yeah, I don't have the room for it, nor do I have a grand piano, so I have to do techno instead.
So the space dictates your musical creativeness. Creativeness, I guess.
Creativity.
Yeah.
And how can you make connection with music that are not your personal favorites? Like, let's say you said you focus on melodies, harmonies mostly. What about styles that are a bit more monotonous but still electronic? Can you make connections with those? Can you be inspired with music that you wouldn't necessarily prefer to listen to?
So yes, because I'm, as I said, I really enjoy electronic textures and sounds, synthetic sounds, and they're the forerunners, with the underground dance, techno, house music, stuff like that. So I can listen to it and really get some ideas about the aesthetics, the way they use sounds, the way they mix it, and so on. That happens quite a lot. One of my best friends, Theo, another musician on the scene, he actually he bombards me with a lot of links because he's a DJ, as you know, and he's doing a lot of acid techno and other things like that. And he bombards me with links on a daily basis, and I listen to all of them. And it actually helps me to stay current with certain things as well, right? And I also sometimes listen to some top list, some chart stuff, also to kind of see what's going on and get some ideas. But it's more than about the sounds and the aesthetics, and maybe the soundscape of what's a mix today. Like in the 90s, techno was mixed completely different from today, and staying current to hear like the trends and how people balance their frequencies or something. Because I do a lot of mastering of other people's music, then I kind of can't apply my same style or same aesthetics to everything. I need to understand the aesthetics that they are trying to achieve, and and then I help them to realize that I'm not applying my own aesthetics. So that also forces me to listen to a bunch of different things on and off, even though it's more like educational and not so much recreational, shall we say.
Yeah. You mentioned DJing there for a bit, Theo, and all of that. You did the syntax error set way back when, I don't know,
Way back.
5 years ago, something like that? 6 maybe?
6, yeah.
And are you considering doing more of those at some point, like, I don't know, at like live gigs or online maybe? Would be interesting to see you do online sets as well.
So I did that on Edison a few years ago with the Zeitgeist stuff. And then also, I did before I did Syntax Error, and then I did Birdie as well. Also with the Star Child and Sycophant stuff. It's not really my thing. But again, if the project has a concept that intrigues me, and that there's some concept there and aesthetics that I'm interested in, then that makes it purposeful. So not for the sake of doing a DJ set or a live gig. There has to be something else there. It's like if I get a couple of analog synths and then I really fall in love with doing weird stuff with them, and then I come up with some concept to make it less weird and more enjoyable or danceable, then maybe that could be a live gig. So it has to come from somewhere else. And then, if you can do it from home or a studio, remote online, then I guess that's also more convenient. So who knows, but it has to be some kind of idea and concept that I find worthwhile, not just for the sake of DJing or performing live.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people would be curious, getting back to games a little bit. What were your absolute favorite C64 games?
Paradroid.
Yes, we talked about it earlier. I still remember.
It's the best. It's the best game. It's the best game design. Still haven't. I've been working on some amazing games, and nothing's been as well designed as Paradroid. Period. So games for playing. That one, but then also like Pirates. And then International Karate Plus. I actually played it with my wife last week. Exploding Way of the Exploding Fist. There's so many games, right? So you kind of forget them. But Paradroid is kind of the number one favorite for so many reasons. But I mean, back then you were grinding all the new games you got. It's not like today where you have unlimited resources for entertainment, right? And media to consume. So you got one game or two. I know in Hungary it was even more so, like you were starving for getting something in the scene, and then you're gonna like go through everything there is in this piece until you get the next piece of software. Sweden was different. We got a lot more. However, you were still like watching that demo 20 times and playing that game for 5 days, and so on and so forth, right? And it's just too many to mention, so I'll just go with Paradroid.
Awesome. So, do you have any top secret projects that you can't really talk about? As I told you before, it's fine. We will keep it amongst ourselves. So you're fine. So, anything
Except Sidulator.
except Sidulator, yeah. Well, that's kind of public, but any secrets really?
Well, I mean, obviously now at work when we're shipping Assassin's Creed Nexus VR next week on Thursday, I think it is. Obviously, I'm working on something else. I cannot talk about that at all. It's not been publicly announced. It's going to be a long time until that happens or the game is even released. It's the thing with these AAA titles. You can work so many years and you can't talk about it. It's just part of what it is. However, other projects, so Retromantics is something that is very close and dear to me, and I have some upcoming things there. And then there is a demo on the Commodore 64 that we're working on, where for this time we're actually starting with the music, and the music dictates the graphics, and the graphics dictates the visual effects, and then the code comes at the end. Usually the other way around.
Yeah. Do you have like a storyline first that you base the music on?
No, so I made the song. It's pretty long, and there's a bunch of parts in it, and it's more about an emotion. It's very, very emotional song, so it's not techno. And then a really, really talented graphic artist in Norway has been doing some amazing artwork, and he's the one doing the storyboard. And then there's some programmers in Sweden that are going to make this come to life. I don't know when this is happening or what stage we are right now, actually. The music is done, though, obviously. So that's the thing. And then I have another project that I was supposed to release at X, but for personal reasons, I had to cancel that. I'm hoping next year to be at X, and I'm hoping that I get my ass back in gear to actually finish this, because it's very tedious. But it's music, and nobody's done it on the 64 for some 27 years.
Ooh, nice teaser.
I've said too much again.
How is that possible?
So there are some stuff coming up, and also 64 related. So we'll see.
Nice.
Okay.
So
Looking forward to that. Well, any other future plans that you would be happy to share with us, or anything that you think it's worthwhile for the people to check out before we say goodbye?
Oh, I think those are the ones, and we'll see what happens. Now we just released Encore 500 earlier this year with the Amiga remixes. It's doing really well, and there might be a next Encore album. We just don't know what it would be.
Exactly. Now that you did 64 and 500, what's next?
the calculator.
That's the question, right? We know how to do it. We know we can do it. We have a lot of people that can be involved. We just don't know what it would be. So So that's about it. Otherwise, I'm just happy that there's still so much going on in the demo scene. And it's not stagnating, at least not when it comes to demo releases, and we still have a couple of really cool events. And I happen to live very close to a bunch of them, like Evoke, Revision, X. So I can actually attend them.
Transmission.
That's online, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very close.
It's always close.
I'm actually hoping to get to Montreal for a week next year for business purposes, and then I can meet the Transmission founder people. Yeah, that was
nice.
fun.
Awesome.
So we'll see. Yeah, so that's about it, really. I'm also, I would really then take the opportunity to thank everybody who are involved in making the 50-year anniversary birthday demo for me. I'm still overwhelmed. That was so good. I can't find the words for it. So if I forgot to thank anybody before, then everybody involved, thank you so much. It's still, that was crazy.
Wow. I guess that's a very good place to end this interview. So thank you very, very much for being here with us. And I don't know, any parting words for the Transmission64 people?
So yeah, let's all enjoy this online festivity that is Transmission64 this weekend. I know I will.
Thank you very much, and see you at Next X.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very, very many. And back to us, I guess, in the other studio, which is this studio, but in a different time.